You're listening to The Play Pouch. Welcome back, everyone. This session we are talking about the length of single-player computer games. Are they too short? And is there a threshold that is acceptable, etc.? And we're going to give a couple of case examples. But before we do, if you like our channel, please subscribe. Please give us a thumbs up. Please give us a comment and click the notification bell. All that good stuff. And we're just going to dive right in. I'm joined, as usual, with my partner in crime, Nick. How are we doing, buddy?
Not bad, mate. We're going to talk about Call of Duty as well, aren't we?
Yes, we're good. Call of Duty will be a fairly common theme in this cast. Yes.
So you let me know when you want to give me the stage on Call of Duty, because I've got a couple of things to say about Call of Duty, especially the last one that came out this year.
Yeah. Well, I will hand it over fairly quickly, but I mean, for me, I do think that there's been a huge decline in the length of single-player games. I feel like people have gotten lazier. And a good example of that is Call of Duty. And I'm handing it over to you.
Well, Call of Duty, I mean, I've never been a massive fan of Call of Duty, Pete. And generally they left me alone. I left them alone. It was like a kind of good match. You know, you do your crappy death matches and I'll sit here and play my proper single-player games. Until the other week when I decided to turn on my Xbox. Just turn on my Xbox normally, as you would. And as it's booting up, they throw an ad in my face for Call of Duty.
Oh, yeah, I heard about this.
I showed no interest in Call of Duty. I've never played a Call of Duty game. But Microsoft, in their infinite wisdom, decided to just shove it in my face. I couldn't avoid it.
Yeah.
It was just shoved right there. And I was very, very upset at that, because it's like, well, I pay for my Xbox Live. I pay for my internet connection. I pay for, I've got the Game Pass, so I've got all their services.
Yeah.
I even am okay with them having the little sponsored thing in your home menu. There's always like a bunch of little screens, and one of them is always whatever they choose to sponsor you, right? And that's slightly annoying, but I kind of like live with that. But then they shoved this in my face.
Yeah.
And I lost it for a little bit. And it actually made me even less likely than before to get it. But, I calmed down a little bit until about a week later when I turned on my Xbox and I shoved it in my face again.
Oh,
so
mate.
This was more than once. And you can't avoid it, Pete.
Yeah.
You can't. It literally just appears on your screen after you sign in. It appears on your screen before you go to the home. Now, that is, as far as I'm concerned, that is unacceptable.
It's disgusting.
It's egregious and it's out of order. And Microsoft, who obviously had to okay it, right?
Yeah.
And nobody put a gun to their head. So, no, they obviously took the money to do this. And they thought it was fine. And if this is the start of this, because this is the first time that this has happened with this game, if they start doing this on a regular basis and actually just throwing in ads you can't skip,
yeah,
the shit's going to fly. Honestly.
I mean, like, you know me, I absolutely cannot stand adverts, right? In any shape or form. So for me, if it was in your position, I think the Xbox would be destroyed by now. I would literally have set fire to it in my back garden. I'd be like, no, go fuck yourself. That is just absolutely the most insidiously disgusting tactic that Microsoft have ever pulled out.
And it has pissed me off. And I know that Yongye covered it. So it has made, it's not just me who's pissed off at it. It's obviously a lot of people. I mean, if you're a Call of Duty fan, I guess you don't give a shit, right? But for those of us, believe it or not, there are quite a few of us who actually don't play the Call of Duty games, which we'll get on to, maybe more of us all the time, the way it's going. We don't want to see that shit. It's bad enough that they cover part of the screen in your homepage. It's a small part. It's bad enough that that's even there, because I don't really want that there. But you kind of like accept it to a certain degree. But this stuff where you literally have to feast eyes on it. And they and they say, you know, in the advertising world, they kind of say there's no such thing as bad advertising, right? Because even if, as long as you see the advert's done its job. Because the part of your brain will remember it. The fact that I'm talking to you about it now means that in a certain way, their advertising has been successful. It's not going to make me buy it, but it's stuck in my brain because I'm annoyed by it. So
Well,
some of them will say, well, that it's done its job because it's still in your brain. You still have the brand awareness. That's what they would claim.
well, this is the thing, okay? Like, it is all down to the age group. We are in our 40s,
Mm-hmm.
and as a consequence, I mean, I can't speak for you, but I'm pretty certain in the assumption that, like me, you may well remember these adverts, but because it's been pushed on you in this way, or in any way, as far as I'm concerned, you'll never act on it. Like, this is why I
True.
have YouTube Premium, because
So, so so do I. Yeah, for the same reason, bro. So do I. Yeah.
yeah, I can't stand it, mate.
No.
And it has the opposite effect. Like,
Yeah.
if you're trying to push an advert on me, it's just like, well, I'm purposefully going to avoid that product now because you've tried to push that on me in such a horrible, insidious way.
Yep. I'm less likely to be attracted to that unless I get really desperate.
Yeah, but
Right,
if
because
you're
I don't want to give you the money because of what you've done. I don't want to give you the money.
But if you're, if you have a young mind, if your brain's not fully developed yet, then it's just going to be like, oh, okay, I'll buy that. And this is what they're preying on. This is why they're doing this, because they know full well that there's going to be young people out there that are just going to go, oh, cool, I'll check that out. It's a shooter game. Oh, nice, nice. Oh, the new Call of Duty. Yeah, safe, safe. Brain dead, right? It's just like this whole brain dead ideal of marketing, and it's just like that. What you said earlier, like bad advertising is good advertising or whatever.
That's a theory. That's a theory. I'm not sure I agree with it, but
Yeah, so it's absolutely disgusting, their practices, and the fact that they're trying to just sneak it in and hope that people won't notice. And no, yeah, we've
I,
not, we've all
I mean,
noticed.
I understand the need for advertisement. If you're at a TV station, right? That is how you get your money. I understand it to a certain degree, but Xbox need that. They need that money, do they? They haven't got enough. They need to do that, do they?
No, of course they fucking don't. They just
That's
want
the
more.
point. That's the point. And you're gonna start really pissing people off. Maybe nobody will react by throwing a console. I know you said you would, but maybe it's not at that point. But if this becomes a regular thing, and I'm hopefully that they've got enough feedback to realize that they better not fucking do it again. But if it does become a regular thing, oh my goodness, that's all I'm saying. That's what I think of Call of Duty. So fuck Call of Duty because of that. And also, Pete, we're not doing the worst games of the year yet. Not for another month or so.
Yeah.
As of right now, that's there, and I've not even played the game. I hate it that much, but what they've done means that I want to put that game on my worst 5 of the year list because I despise it so much and everything it stands for.
I mean, there are other reasons why the new Call of Duty is like pretty fucking bad. The length of the single player.
Leads
It's
us on nicely, doesn't it, too?
yeah. It's 4 hours at the most,
It's
from what I've
terrible.
gathered. Seriously, yeah. I mean, like, I would not. For me, obviously, being not an online matchmaker, like a fucking PvP player,
Me either, yeah.
if I spent 60 quid on a game and it was literally 4 hours, bruv, like I would just be really pissed off about it. And the fact that it's over that threshold of 2 hours where you can refund it, I'd just be like, wow, I would be so fucking angry right now if like I had done that.
The thing is with the Call of Duty games, like as you said, neither one of us are really a practitioner in the deathmatch stuff, right? So they are not really made for us. But, you know, if you are a single player, more of a single player orientated player, I don't think you're going to buy these games because surely everybody knows by now that let's look at it from a resource standpoint. 80% of their resources go into the online modes,
Yeah.
and maybe 20%, and I could even be being generous in that, going to the single player. And it's been like that more or less every single year for I can't remember how long. Maybe not the first couple of Call of Duties where it was about the second World War and all stuff. Maybe they had, maybe they hadn't quite gone all in on the death matches, but for like the last like 10 years or so, it's multiplayer first, and the single player is tacked on, which is obviously the opposite from what we know or expect from our games. 80% single player, and if they want to do a little bit of co-op or a little bit of, like the Mass Effects did with their multiplayer stuff, which is co-op stuff, not death matches, then okay. But it's the opposite for these kind of. It's the opposite for Call of Duty and games like it in Battlefield. It's all about multiplayer. The single player stuff doesn't even matter. So I don't. So part of me doesn't even understand why people are complaining. It's like, oh, what were you expecting? You know by now, surely, that they don't care about the single player. The single player's tacked on. You know this.
Yeah.
Do you know what I
like
mean?
it was a gradual process. I mean, I've got a little
Yeah.
tale to tell about the first Call of Duty game. When the first Call of Duty came out, I played it with Alan, I think, for a bit, and we were enjoying the single player game, and it was all a challenge and all that good stuff. And then when we got to the end, there was an extra challenge. There was one last level where you had to get from one point of a plane to another. So you had to sort of go from one end to the other, up the stairs, and then go back again. You had to do that in a specific time, and it was nigh on impossible.
Really?
Right? And I assume it was possible because other people would have probably gotten it, but it was an achievement. It was a special little achievement. And I lost my shit because we tried that for like 2 nights in a row, I think it was, like 6 hours each night, and we just could not do it. And the irony is that Alan got really close on the first try.
Okay.
Right. And ever since, we just did not get close again. And I got so angry that I not only snapped the disc, but I sent an email.
That's great.
To whoever it was, Infinity Ward or whatever, just literally blasting them. It's just like, what kind of cunts are you? Sadists. Why would you do that? It's like it's fucking impossible. And for us, it was. I mean, like, when we're not shit players. It's like, Alan was on form, and we both did our best, and we just could not do it. And it really pissed us off. And so, yeah, after that, I just thought to myself, I'm never playing a Call of Duty game again.
I've got to ask, did you ever get a reply?
No, of course I didn't. They would have handed it around. It would have been one of those emails that they handed around the office and had a laugh at it. It's like, fine, probably. Whatever. But at least I vented my frustration. And but yeah, I think that was the catalyst which said, I'm never playing a Call of Duty war game ever again.
Well, the thing is that a lot of these kind of I'm not even sure what the genres, what they're called. I guess just war games, I suppose, right? I mean,
yeah.
So you've got obviously you've got your the big one obviously is COD, and then Battlefield probably is the other big one. Yeah. And the Battlefield kind of was similar, isn't it? Some of their stories, I think, were bigger parts of their games initially, and then they just kind of
they put more effort into it.
Yeah,
Battlefield, and their graphics looked a lot nicer than Call of Duty at some stage. But as time went on, both Call of Duty and Battlefield started to sort of go in the way of making the online P2P more than the single player. So as it just sort of shrunk and just went into the opposite direction. And now we've just it's done a complete fucking reverse, where, as you just said, it's like 80% is the online facet of it, and 20% is just like this tacked on hook. It's like, oh, here, blah. But with this new latest title, they didn't even make a fucking effort, bruv. It's like there's no.
So it's gone from 80-20 to 90-10. Then is what you're telling me.
Well, it's not just that. It's the fact that there's no set pieces. You remember how all the previous Call of Duty games, it was all just like spectacular cinematic sequences?
Well, from what I saw from other reviews and stuff, like Angry Joe normally reviews them, and it's just set piece after set piece, more or less, wasn't it?
But this new one, just there isn't. I mean, like there might be a couple of bits at the beginning, but it is just literally the game just throws you on a map at one point and then just asks you to get to the other side. It's like, wow,
So yeah,
yeah.
okay. Well, I don't, do you think maybe a lot of their do you think maybe they've lost steam? The kind of war PvP games have lost steam because of stuff like Fortnite and stuff like Overwatch. I know that Overwatch 2 was kind of not being received that well. Overwatch 1.5, I think, as they kind of comically call it.
Yeah,
They must have taken a large chunk. And what was that other game that came out?
Fortnite.
No, there was another one came out, and it was. I remember it being a big deal because you could ping stuff in a certain way that had never been done before. I forget the name of it, but it was another one that kind of ate into their player bases, I suppose, so that it wasn't all people playing Battlefield and Call of Duty. Like their other games had kind of taken some of their player base.
Oh, definitely, definitely, it has. That's had a huge impact on
Like
it.
PUBG's, a lot of people play PUBG and a lot of people play Fortnite, and
Yeah,
instead nowadays, don't they? So
yeah. They're running that format into the ground, and I've always been an advocate for like, do we have to have a shooter game all the time? Can we not like sort of like do something else and try to innovate in a different way?
I always put myself in somebody, and it's difficult, but I always put myself in somebody maybe of a much older, like even older than us, like who's 60s or something like that, right? Or somebody just for whatever reason is just completely never seen a game before in their life. And I think if you went up to those people and you said, when you think of video games, what do you think of? And I guarantee that the majority of them will say big guys with guns.
Yeah, I mean, like it's always been that winning formula, hasn't it? I mean, like Doom was the one that really turned heads, and then it was like the Unreal Tournament and stuff like that. But it's just like there's got to be something else, man. And indie game developers they're definitely sort of innovating. They're trying to find different ways. There was one game where you took a snapshot of something, and then you could go into that snapshot. It was really weird. I mean, like there was another game that was like a platform base, but you could spin that platform round by 90 degrees and sort of like traverse in a different way. I mean, that's the kind of shit I want to see.
There's a number of games even this year or last year that. Do you remember a couple of years ago, Among Us? It
Yeah,
was like this revelation, and it's the basics of that game are very basic. It's like playing the movie Thing, really. There's one person who's one or two people who are kind of trying to what the word I'm looking for. They're trying to obviously cause problems for everybody else, and everybody else doesn't know who they are. So it's like they go around trying to kill them and stuff like that, and it's like you don't know who's on your side and who isn't. And there was another game called, is it Vampire Survivors?
I don't know. I'm not familiar with that.
No, and I have not played it, but it's quite a budget title. But apparently, it looks like one of the most popular games of the last year and a half, and it's this small, cheap, independent title.
Yeah.
It's on the Xbox as well. I was half considering getting it because I haven't got it yet. But it's like, what's the fuss about? I'm curious to know why is everyone so engrossed with this game that, for all intents and purposes, is quite a budget title. So I might have to give it a go just to see what is it that's so appealing. Because when you look at it, it doesn't look like anything that would be, but there must be something about it. So
And we're showing our age, obviously. I mean, we've come to the point where we may well have been interested in shooters at one point, but it's like, nah, man, we want something else.
I mean, I played. I'm sure you've heard of this, Pete, but I don't know if you ever played it. It was on Game Pass for a little while, and I kind of I'd heard about it on the PC. It's called Hades,
Oh yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah,
and like I say, I think it was. I was watching E3, I think, with Alan one year or the year it came out on Xbox, and it was one of those things where, oh yeah, it's available now. They announced it. Oh, it's available now. Go try it today because it's on Game Pass. And then I tried it that night, and you know what? It's bloody brilliant.
oh yeah,
And you wouldn't think so because it's not a high graphic fidelity game. It's quite an old school kind of game, but the fluidity of the combat, the game mechanics, how everything blended together, it just shows you that game design is so bloody important. And there's a sequel actually coming out. They announced it not that long ago, so I'll be looking forward to that. But that's just an example of quite an independent game, which I think it might have won Game of the Year that year. or
Oh, good.
it was at least up for a number of awards.
Nice.
Yeah,
But
so
we are sort of diverting slightly away
yeah,
from the
yeah.
topic, but so we'll just sort of rein it in. The whole idea of shortening single player titles. I mean, I personally think that 4 hours for a single player title is fucking insulting.
Depends on the price, bruv.
Well, yeah, if it's a full price game, which is what they're going to try and charge, let's face it.
Yeah, I don't think you can justify like, you know what the argument's going to be, because I hear this argument a lot. A lot of people are going to say, well, okay then. Well, when you go to the cinema, right, the average film, let's say 2 hours for argument's sake. When you go to the cinema, don't you pay nearly as much as buying, if you, especially if you go with a friend, on and then you probably get some food and everything. In those 2 hours of entertainment, haven't you nearly spent as much of the game? That's the argument. I'm not saying I agree with it, but that's the argument.
Yeah, well, it's completely. Well, first of all, it's irrelevant. Second of all, it's a completely different fucking medium, right? Games are like motion books, or they should be, or it's a completely different.
They're arguing
thing.
though the time for money though. That's their argument is the time for money. Like, oh, you've got 2 hours of entertainment for X amount of money. That's how they look at it, not how I do, how they do. I've heard it, bruv.
But we don't have to go to the cinema to watch the movies. We can just wait
That's
for
true.
it to come out on digital or on disc.
Yeah, that's true.
So that just renders that whole point mute for a start. And the second point is, it's like, if you're going to put all that effort in to make a fucking computer game, but only have it as 4 hours, that's an insult. And if you're going to try and charge 60 quid, it is a fucking insult. Now, if you bring the price down to 30 or 20, that's a completely different issue. That's fine. But don't charge a 60 quid for a 4 hour game and then, spend the rest of your fucking time developing a PvP sort of deathmatch thing, which is the same fucking shit as it has been with all the other titles. It's nothing new.
They might add a new gun, Pete. What are you talking about? They might add a new gun. They might add a new map.
They might have a new skin,
Might have a new skin. Yeah,
which they can charge you $10 for.
yeah. They'll charge you that after the game comes out.
But all of this is tied in with microtransactions, the whole idea of microtransactions. Thank you, smartphones, because that's what really started it.
Remember, you got to buy your battle passes though, so you can get the extra XP. You got to buy your battle passes for them.
Yeah, and oh god, yeah, there's battle passes, but it's like, it's unacceptable. I find it unacceptable. If it was a 10-hour game, that's okay. So I think the threshold really is anything less than, say, 7 hours is a fucking insult.
What about? I can give you a recent case study if you want, Pete.
Yeah.
Okay, so Assassin's Creed Mirage came out a couple of months ago.
Okay.
For a slightly lower price. Now, it wasn't £50. Obviously, we're talking UK money. So nowadays, in case you don't live in the UK, probably the retail price of most games, it depends on where you go, but normally you're going to spend between 50 and 60, depending on where you go. But normally you won't get it less than 50.
It's 70 quid now, bro.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Assassin's Creed Mirage, normally you can get it for about 40. So it's slightly less, and it's 12 hours. Is that worth it? 40 quid, because they've reduced the price because they've admitted that it's a smaller game. And I believe in the reviews I've seen, it's about 12 hours for 40 quid.
Is it really 12 hours?
Yeah.
An Assassin's Creed game is 12 hours?
Yeah, because it was originally designed to be DLC. And then Ubisoft said, fuck it, we'll make it a unique Assassin's Creed game, because it was originally being made as a DLC for Valhalla. And then they said, fuck it, we'll turn it into to an old style Assassin's Creed game that's 12 hours.
Fuck's sake.
And that released for 40 quid, so not quite as much as your bigger releases. So a double A game.
It's still a piss take, I think. For 40 quid, and 60 quid in America and then sort of like 80 quid in Canada. Like, really? You're going to charge us that amount of money?
So then, Pete, I think as you were trying to say, what is a good ratio from hour to money then? As silly as it might sound, because there's no perfect answer, really. It is game dependent. What are you doing in those hours, right? But what would you say?
Well, I think it depends on this is where we sort of go into sort of like, well, what title is it? If it's an Assassin's Creed game, I'd expect to be able to pump in about 30 to 50 hours. If if you've got all those side quests and all these things to do, like there was in like Syndicate or
it's only one area. So unlike the older Assassin's Creed games, where normally there was different areas per se, 2 or 3 areas, this is the equivalent of there being just one area. So,
well, I think that's just lazy. They wanted to get something out to make some money.
Yeah,
clearly that's what it was. And it comes down to, we're spending so much money on these games. It costs so much. Really? How does it cost so much? I don't understand, because back in the day, 10, 20 years ago, it wasn't costing a lot. So what's changed? Because if you're talking about the amount of people it takes to develop this kind of thing, then obviously if you adjust for inflation, what's changed?
the only change that I can see in let's say we go back 20 years. Let's say we go to the year 2000 for argument's sake, right? The only thing that's increased is voice actors and actors in general for doing the what's it called, Pete? When they put the stuff on them and they have to move around.
The what? Sorry,
I'm not describing it very well. When they put the stuff on, motion captures, right? So motion capture,
yeah,
and voice actors, because obviously nearly every game has voice acting. Whereas back in the year 2000, I think the occasional game did, but it wasn't commonplace. That's the only thing I can see different, is that they have to spend more on voice talent.
Well, even then, I don't see what the issue is, because they refined it. Back in the day, like as you said, in 2006 or 8, they had to animate by hand the movement and the character movement, all that kind of stuff. With dialogue, they had to animate the lip syncing. Now you can just whack on a suit, get one of them camera rigs, head rigs, and like they did with with Andy Serkis and Gollum.
Yeah.
And it's all refined. It's all there for you. All the data is there, saved in a file. You just like throw that file on the figure, do some refinements, job done. So I don't think that's an argument. They've simplified that process. If I bought an iPhone and I bought you an iPhone, we could be able to do that. We could have digital versions of ourselves as metahumans from Unreal and put them in our podcast and have all of that. I mean, and it would just be AAA grade goodness, basically. And we could do that with just a couple of grand.
Well, then it's just Greek, then, isn't it? I mean,
I'm trying to find...
What else can it be?
Yeah. I'm trying to find a reason why they've turned around and said it costs a lot more.
Maybe it's the same reason why Bobby Kotick, or whatever his name is, has as much money as he does. These CEOs in these companies take such a large chunk. So basically they're just getting richer, and the developers probably getting paid a similar amount. So the extra money is probably going to the CEOs who make crazy amounts of money. I think there was like a top 100 list, was it this year or last year? And I think there's 7 or 8 of them who come from like EA and Activision or stuff like that, bro. So.
Yeah, Ed, I can't find another reason other than the fact that it's greed. We want more. We want more. There's a great song by Muse, and it's called Animals. If you haven't heard it, listen to it. It's a perfect song to sort of exemplify what is going on here, because there's no fucking excuse. Now, if anyone who is listening to this is a developer, please let us know what it is that's costing so fucking much, right? And why it takes 5 years to develop a game.
Bro, listen.
Please let us know.
Bro, I've got the answers for you. Those cocaine and hookers, mate, they are expensive shit nowadays. The CEO's got to spend a lot more on those ladies of the night, bruv, and all the coke and blow they can get their hands on, bruv. They ain't cheap. Cheap, mate.
So I do think that they're trying to minimize and slowly reduce the length of single player games, and I think it's disgusting.
I remember it's going to be another Assassin's Creed game because I remember a couple of years ago, was it Odyssey, the one set in Greece?
Ooh, yeah, I think so.
And the problem with that is that there was too much. There was too much there was too much game mode, and I played that, and I didn't finish it. And one of the reasons why I didn't finish it, I was just like, "There's so much more left to do," and it's
Too
a weird
much.
feeling to have that in a game.
Yeah.
But it does prove to me that sometimes games can actually stick around a bit longer. And I've got another game to give you a good proof of that. We have covered this game a lot, so I won't go into it loads, but very quickly. Alien Isolation.
Yeah.
An argument could easily be made that if you cut that game in half, it might be a better game because the second half of that game is much less fun than the first half, and that's and it's true. And Angry Joe said the same thing, and you know what? He was bang on. That if you slice that game in half, you'd still get a good 15-hour story, but it might have been a better game because for the second half of the game drags a bit because you end up doing a lot of the same stuff. There's a lot of backtracking you do through the second half of the game, and it's kind of like I've already been here. I've already kind of dealt with the alien. I'll be careful not to spoil it, but the alien goes away for a long time in the second half of the game. Eventually, it returns, but just saying that they could have ended it when you killed the alien originally at the halfway point in the game because then the second half of the game is much worse. It's just an example where sometimes they can be too long, but I would say that that's not often. It's not often that happens. Normally it's the other way around. Normally games are not long enough. I will say in general, but there are exceptions.
I think I agree with you. I mean, like, there has to be a balance. There is such a thing as too much. And it all, again, comes down to the genre of what you're playing.
Yeah.
I think a lot of games developers have incorporated RPG mechanics without even realizing the impact that has.
And that's another podcast, mate. I could go on for ages and ages about how they've kind of raped. There's an interesting word to use, but I'll stick with that one. They've raped the RPG a little bit of what it is because everything's kind of been. There's RPGs and everything now. Everything's got a level system. Everything's got an XP system, and it's just like it's been a little bastardized. Not a little bit.
Yeah,
that's another podcast probably. Yeah.
I think for me the perfect game length of a specific genre, so say like a single player shooter, is something like Far Cry 4. I absolutely adore Far Cry 4, and
So the one set in Himalayas.
Yeah, it's absolutely perfect. It's a perfect length, perfect story, and it just like boom, boom, boom. I think it's like a sort of a 20, 30-hour game. And it just, I mean, that's just the perfect length for me. But again, it all does come down to the type of game it is. If you've got your dedicated RPG like Elder Scrolls, you're going to want to spend a lot longer.
Yeah, it is genre specific, isn't it? Very much so.
But for a shooter like Call of Duty, 4 hours is a piss take.
No. I think for a shooter, to be honest, I think for those more kind of action kind of adventure kind of games, I think maybe you don't want to go more than 20 hours, but I don't think you want to go under 10 hours. I think in between the 10 to 20 is probably
it's a good length.
Yeah. And a lot of it depends again on the game. I mean, we hear all the time about the developers talking about the 30-second game loop, right? So what that is, obviously, in case you don't know, is that basically you'll do the same thing within a 30-second period before then you move on and do that same 30-second loop of gameplay, and that carries the whole game. So if that's true, then the variety in that 30-second game loop will kind of dictate how quickly you get bored with the game.
Yeah.
So in the longer games, they need to keep on kind of drip feeding you new abilities and stuff like that. Take games like Batman Arkham Asylum or maybe the Tomb Raider games, where a lot of the times when you're in those kind of games, you're walking around and then you'll see a door or a pathway and you need a certain gadget, which you don't have and you won't get yet. So the idea is that, so at some point I've got to remember to go back to that door because that part of the game isn't unlocked yet. And then you play a bit more and then eventually you'll get the gizmo which then enabled you to go back to open the door or go down the pathway or clear the obstacle that's stopping you from accessing that kind of part of the game. So that's what I mean by kind of drip feeding you stuff.
Yeah.
You know, drip feeding you drip feeding you new abilities, new gadgets, new enemies. That's important as well, Pete. You can't be fighting the same enemies at the start of the game as you are at the end of the game. So you need to drip feed the enemy types. Not just, you know, obviously cosmetically they have to look different, but of course the mechanics have to kind of adapt a little bit as well. So they need to become a bit more challenging as well as the game. It's all about drip feeding the player, not blowing your load, so to speak, so fast.
Yeah.
Well, you know what they do, though, Pete. You know what seems to be a little bit of a trend that I've noticed, and playing Starfield, and I'm not sure why I'm still playing it, Pete. It's the truth. I'm kind of like, I just am. I'm still waiting for something to happen, which is my point. I'm getting at. You could. And the word is could lose yourself, and I reckon that to explore every planet in that game, to properly explore it, like basically to survey every planet to 100%, right? So you have to go down there and you have to run around trying to find the traits and everything. If you spent all your time doing it, I reckon that it could take somebody 500 hours plus to finish Starfield. Yeah. 480 hours of that, you'd be bored shitless. And then you'd have 20 hours probably of the main quest, which might entertain you. The other 480 hours was you running around on barren planets trying to find resources and stuff like that to scan. So that is just an example of a massive, massive game where nothing really happens in the majority of it. And I'm starting to think that more and more devs are seeing that as an excuse for stories in games. They're a lot more like, we're going to give you a sandbox to play in, kind of like Todd Howard tried to do with Fallout 76. We're not going to, we're going to put minimal storyline in it, and we're just going to give you a big world for you to kind of engross yourself in. Now, with Fallout 76, it was obviously a shared universe. I mean, I'm talking about single player games like Starfield, where it's just you. So they've created this big sandbox-ish place, where a massive place, and Starfield has got all those planets, right? There's nothing on them, as we know. Virtually nothing on them, but it's still a massive, massive area of game where you apparently can lose yourself in.
Yeah.
And I think way too many games are kind of going that route where we're just going to have these kind of like randomly generated quests, which are appearing more and more if you haven't noticed. These randomly generating quests, and we're putting more time into them than we are handcrafted proper quests that are going to engage you. It's not just Bethesda doing this. Bethesda, yeah, they're the most recent one because Starfield's just come out. But in Assassin's Creed, they have randomly generated quests. In Odyssey that I just talked about, I spent a lot of time just kind of wandering around doing random quests. Yeah, the world's beautiful, and it is. It's unlike Starfield where there is stuff to see and do, but there's still an awful lot of randomization. And one of the reasons why I got burnt out on Odyssey was because I spent a lot of time doing these random quests and realized I'd only explored half the world. And it's like, oh my goodness, I'm burnt out on the game now, and I've done half the proper quests. What do you want? What do you want to see them do? We've said that maybe 10 and 20 hours for shooters, and it is genres. I mean, if you said to me between 10 and 20 hours for an RPG, I'd say that's not long enough.
No, definitely not. Yeah.
And that goes for RPGs and stuff like that. So it is genre specific, but I am 100% agree with you that I don't think that any genre should be 4 hours long, unless there's a little caveat I will say: if they are a small independent game that is very, very narrative driven, like that. What game was on the PlayStation 5 that everybody loved? Journey?
Yeah, is it Journey? I mean, there's this one called Limbo.
Yeah,
which was, I think, about that length.
Yeah, so they can be that short, but these are £15 games.
Yeah, well, my game's not going to be longer than 4 hours. I'll tell you that much.
Well, and you'll probably, unless you're a greedy bastard, you won't charge £40 for it. So
no, tenner at the most.
That's what I mean. So, and that's fine. So these kind of smaller, kind of more independent games, they can be 4 hours. I think that's okay. But yeah, I mean,
there's definitely a good reason why your game, under certain circumstances, should be 4 hours and not longer, as you said, with indie games, or maybe it's like a sort of an experience.
Yeah.
But if we're talking like a fully fledged RPG, yeah, it's got to be longer. But I mean, yeah, I mean, like, it's very easy to veer off the point and start going into tangents and stuff. So yeah, it's a good topic, and we want your opinion. We want to know what you feel. So please do leave comments in our.
Tell us what the shortest game you've ever played is, because I've heard a couple of, I've seen a couple of reviews, not recently, of very low budget games, especially on the Steam platform, where they have minutes, not hours, minutes. So I know there's games out there, none that I've played per se, that are a couple of minutes experience, and of course they're a quid or something. So if anyone's played any of them, I'd love to know about a game that's a couple of minutes long, but it's actually good.
Yeah,
How good are those 10 minutes of gameplay?
definitely.
Interesting.
Definitely, for sure, yeah. That's going to wrap up our podcast. If you, again, liked what you heard and you like what you hear and all that kind of stuff, if you think we're awesome people, then, give us a sub, give us a thumbs up and leave us a comment, click the notification bell, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Because it definitely helps us out.
And we're still quite a new channel as well, guys. So,
Yes, please consider it. Even if you're on the fence, just give us a sub and forget about us. Anyway,
way to hook 'em in, Pete. Well done, mate.
I did that well, didn't I?
Yeah.
All right, guys. We'll see you on the next episode.
Yeah. Take care, guys.
Take care, everyone. Goodbye.